there, St. John Nicholas, with my friendly bow, the feast of reason and the flow of soul.
Hello, and welcome to Feast of Reason. Today, we're exploring a question that sits right at the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and reason. What are dreams actually telling us? My guest today is Ara Trembly, a psychotherapist and a Christian counselor with nearly 2 decades of experience working with the unconscious mind, dreams, and human behavior. In his new book, Dreaming God's Way, he argues that dreams aren't just psychological phenomena, but may actually be a way God communicates with us. I tend to see dreams more as reflections of the mind than messages from beyond, so this should be a really interesting conversation. Ara, welcome to Feast of Reason.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So maybe you could start with telling us what led you to focus so much on this work on dreams.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been in practice for 20 years. But even before that, before I began practicing, I've always been interested in dreams. I've always been interested in my own dreams. I'm one of those people who, without prompting, I would write down my dreams and then try
Mm.
and figure out what they meant. So that was probably in college age, and et cetera. But I was doing a lot of reading back then. Of Carl Jung, who was kind of, the guru of dream interpreters among psychologists. And so I would try and use his methods to interpret my dreams. But as I learned more and I started working with patients more, I realized that there's Jung has a lot of good ideas about how to interpret dreams, especially in terms of symbols. Um, there was probably more to it than that. And then I looked at the way dreams are interpreted in the Bible, and I realized that they're interpreted very much the same way that Jung interpreted dreams, based on symbols and what those symbols mean to the person who's done the dreaming. So all that to say, uh, I've been able to work with people when they give me their dreams, it often helps me to open things up or helps them to open things up and have a breakthrough and move forward in their therapy. Um, what I like to say is the unconscious mind knows things that our conscious mind doesn't know. It records things that are doesn't it's not like a video recorder. It doesn't record everything, but it does record a lot of things that our conscious mind just can't deal with. It's just too much. Because if the contents of our unconscious mind were to flood our conscious minds, we'd be overwhelmed. We wouldn't be able to do anything. Wouldn't be able to live our lives. So it's good that our minds are set up that way. So that's my kind of one way around saying that's how I became fascinated with this. And I thought people should have a guide to interpreting their dreams. A lot, just not. There are millions of dream books out there that they're like dictionaries. You look them up and you see a symbol. Symbol is the cross. Okay, here's what the cross means. Well, no, the cross, to me, I'm a Christian, so the cross means Jesus. It means the church. But if I'm a, uh, a rescue worker, the cross might mean the Red Cross. Okay, or if I'm a cross-country trucker, the cross might just symbolize a crossroads where I need to be concerned about something. So, uh, you know, any book that says and that a symbol always means something in your dreams is just putting you on. It's just nonsense.
That's interesting. So that sounds like you're making a connection between more individual investigation, psychological investigation of a person, and what is the content of their genetics and experiences that you have to have that as a framework to be able to interpret these things because of these symbols are
Hmm.
so rooted in their individual experience and personage.
Yes, very well put.
Okay. Is that you describe dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. Is that a
Hmm.
Jungian concept or style concept? And what does that really mean in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it is a Jungian concept. I mean, even Freud believed that. Freud
Mhm.
also believed that, and even though they became kind of moral enemies later in life, which is a whole other story. Uh, um, Yes, the unconscious mind, as I was saying before, knows things that we don't, that our conscious mind doesn't. And but sometimes it's useful to tap into that to see some things to give us perspective or to help us out. So one of the in my book, one of the examples I give is the golfer Jack Nicklaus, the great golfer. He's out there, he's playing in a tournament, and he's not doing too well, and he can't figure out what's going wrong. What's wrong with my swing? He's telling himself. So after the day's competition is over, he goes out on the driving range and he starts hitting balls. And he hits like 100 balls, and he still can't figure it out. But that night, when he's sleeping, he dreams about this, and in his dream, he's able to figure
Mm.
out what is going wrong with his swing. And the next day, he applied that, and it worked for him. He did much better. Um, so dreams can help us solve problems by calling to our conscious minds information that the conscious mind doesn't have, but is stored in the unconscious, and then we can use that information to help us to solve a problem. And that happens, that often happens in therapy with dreams that patients will bring up to me. It often will shine light on what's going on in their minds and where they need to go. You know, it's very interesting. One of the questions we ask when people come into therapy is, "What is it you really want to get out of therapy?" And people have a hard time answering that sometimes. But your unconscious mind knows. Your unconscious mind. This is what I want. Yeah, and usually it's some form of peace and understanding and, "Oh, okay, I just wanna be okay." Um, it's some form of that, but it's more detailed. So, again, dreams are a royal road or a window into the unconscious mind, and that's extremely useful.
Yeah. So that the unconscious mind, that person who can't answer the question why they're in at therapy, they're there. So some part of their mind
Exactly.
got them there. So yeah, I guess that's
Yes.
something to get into a little later about the difference between just an unconscious waking mind and
Mhm.
or unconscious mind broadly and dreams.
Yes.
Interesting though, talking about the individualization, right? Looking at a particular person and then how dreams would be interpreted from them. Are there patterns though that you see across, you've had many patients and done this with many people. Are there patterns that you see
Mhm.
that are somewhat common?
The answer to that is no, and
Mm,
the reason is because dreams are they are the ultimate subjective experience. That's why dream books are nonsense, because there
mm,
is no one size fits all with dreams. Um, so I can't say, some people will say, well, if you're dreaming of water, that connotes spirituality. I've heard that before. And I'm thinking, no, there are plenty of dreams that my clients have had that where water played a significant part, but it wasn't about spirituality. It was about something else. Um, so, uh, yeah, so are there patterns that I see? No. I mean, I see a lot of what I do see is that people will tell me. Sometimes people will tell me I don't dream, right? But we know from research, psychological research, that everybody dreams, um, and so you might not remember your dreams, but you do dream. And then people say, well, I can't remember my dreams. And besides being a therapist, I'm a hypnotherapist. So one of the things I'm good at do is planting suggestions. All right. So I just say, why don't you just plant a suggestion to yourself when you're going to bed tonight, and just say to yourself as you're falling asleep, I will remember my dreams. I will remember them. I will remember them. Well, I've had 100% success rate with that. Anybody who does that, it tells me at least they remember at least one dream they had, if not more than one. Okay, just because I decided to pay attention.
mm.
That's the key.
Well, I will see if I can break that record. I'm definitely one of those people who doesn't. Well, I remember. I tend to remember little snippets. There might be a little something I remember, but usually
Mhm.
it's something r- really fantastical, right? Or something that just and somehow that's
Yeah.
what sticks with me. But
Yeah.
I will give that a try, and I will let you know because so
Please do. Please do.
my wife is definitely remembers dreams, and she has I mean, and I certainly have nothing like your expertise, but I don't think you need it to interpret a lot of her dreams. They are so, whether
Sometimes you
it's
don't.
yeah, something about the kids worrying, and she's, here's, I had a dream that our son was standing on the edge of this cliff, and he was like, it's like it doesn't take an advanced degree
Hmm.
to figure that out. And I'm kind of the
Yeah,
opposite. So, but I will give that a chance because as
please do.
coming into this, I sort of thought, well, I'm kind of coming in as an outsider because I'm not really somebody who remembers dreams. So it's interesting to hear that you have experience with
Yeah.
dealing with
Well,
people
and
like me.
dreams are it's like anything else. If you want to remember them, you will. It's,
Mhm.
that's, when I talk to people about hypnotherapy, I say, if you want this to work, it will. If you don't, it won't. I had a lady who came to me for hypnosis to stop smoking, and it's only like 2 sessions. It's easy. And at the end of it, she said, okay, well, I'm not going to stop smoking. And I just did this. She says, I just did this to prove to my husband it wouldn't work. So I said, well, okay. So from the beginning, you didn't want this to work. Is that right? She said,
Right.
yes. I said, okay, good. Well, you got what you wanted, but you're not getting your money back. So we'll see you.
Yeah, there has to be some compliance or susceptibility, right, for that to
Oh
work.
my goodness.
The
Yes, indeed.
so, but for people who do remember their dreams
Hmm.
vividly, what do you think makes it so meaningful and or important? And that's an obvious question, but it seems like a softball I should throw you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's kind of another form of a question is like, how do I know when dreams are important or not? You know, and
Ah, yes.
the answer to that is that there's strong emotion attached to them. That's how you know when they're important. So it could be, obviously if you have a nightmare, most people will remember their nightmares, okay? Because there's a strong emotion, it's a negative emotion, and they'll remember those. But it could be other things. It could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be it could be uh, amusement. I've awoken from dreams laughing at times. Anytime you have a noticeable emotion attached to your dream, there's something important going on there that your unconscious mind's trying to tell you. Because every dream is really a story that our unconscious mind tells us, but it tells us the story in its own inimitable way. And so things happen that couldn't possibly happen in real life, but yet the story seems to make sense if you think about it in reference to what's going on in your life at that moment.
So, one of the, I would imagine that it's certainly possible to misinterpret dreams. One of the
Hmm.
of something that I'm very much more in in my world. I don't know if you're familiar with Jonathan Haidt, who he has this wonderful analogy of a rider and an elephant, and the elephant is essentially our intuition and instinct, and this is largely kind of subconscious emotion, right? And the
Okay.
rider is our ability to reason, and that most
Mm.
of the time, almost all the time, human beings, the rider just rationalizes what the elephant wants as opposed
Hmm.
to, the elephant's going to do what the elephant wants to do. I want to watch Netflix and eat pizza. And the writer says, well, we did have a hard day. And so as opposed to saying, no, no, we remember that New Year's resolution. We're not supposed to do that. So,
Yeah,
that certainly that's a subconscious conscious interaction. And is
sure.
that a challenge that you face in working with patients to kind of to using Height's analogy? Do you have to try to work with their rider to get them to understand what that elephant dream is telling them?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, mostly because patients are in therapy and because they want to know the answer to why they act a certain way or why they feel a certain way. They're much more likely to pay attention to what comes from their unconscious minds and not to dismiss it. Okay, but you bring up a good point because the reason we do hypnosis with some patients is because under hypnosis, the conscious mind just checks out. It gets bored and it kind of goes to sleep. And that's when we get to talk to the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind um, doesn't have a filter, unlike our conscious minds. There's no filter there. So all kinds of things can happen that would not normally happen
Hmm.
in real life. And yet, yes, these are things that make sense for you, the dreamer. And it's it would behoove most of us to pay attention to these things, especially when strong emotions are involved, because again, it's going to offer you clues. So what I can do is I can read you. I'll read you one of the dreams that one of my patients had,
Hmm.
and it because it applies to this. So this is a middle-aged woman whose parents had divorced during her adolescence, and she had herself experienced a traumatic divorce. And she recounted the dream that she's had this dream over and over again, and that's another sign that it's important. When you have the same dream over and over again, that's your
Mm.
unconscious mind hitting you upside the head, saying, "Hey, you pay attention." All right, here's her dream. She says, I'm walking at twilight down a long row of trees toward a cheerful, brightly lit house at the end of a country lane. As I draw near, I can hear children playing, and through a large picture window, I can see a loving couple doing ordinary things, conversing, setting the table, or embracing. I press my face to the window and watch their happiness with great longing. But I am invisible to them, and I must leave before the night falls. This is the dream she had over and over. And when we talked about it, the strong emotions of longing and sadness obviously are
Hmm.
there. And the house and in the country and the loving couple symbolized what she had lost as a child and
Yeah,
what
the
she had
stable
lost
family.
again as an
Yeah.
adult. This is what she had lost. And she was invisible because she was telling herself, this is never going to be possible for me. I'm invisible in that milieu. But
Right. I'm not
yet
part of that world. That's not a
yes,
world I get to
yes.
be in.
And so the night falling at the end symbolizes her falling into depression, which she had. So, but
Mm.
this window, she said, now I understand. Well, once we talked about it, now I understand what's going on. Now I understand why I'm in this state. Once they get the why, the healing begins. The therapy really begins. And the positive note was that some years later, she reported that she was in a happy, stable remarriage, and the dream stopped and never came back.
Yeah, that's great. Oh,
Yeah,
that's she's pretty close to my wife in terms of given her situation, that was very, very
ah,
clear. Again, I
there you
just
go.
come at this disadvantage. I've got to try to, but this idea of all these things coming from the unconscious minds. I think one of the things
Hmm.
and it's in the title of your book, is you say that it's God speaking to us through dreams. Now, do you mean that as a
Hmm.
literal communication from an external source, or is it more emerging from within the mind, or is it both, or are they connected? What
Yeah.
is the difference
Mm.
between the unconscious mind and an external communication from a deity?
So the answer is yes. Okay, to all of that. Is every dream from God? No, I don't think so. Okay, there are some dreams. I call them standard dreams, whatever they are. Kind of what you might have been referring to when we talked earlier, which they're just bits and pieces of meaningless stuff that kind of that we remember. It's not a story. It's not a storyline we could tell. It's just bits and pieces of things. Those are pretty much meaningless. And so is every dream a dream from God? No, I don't think so, but some dreams clearly are. And it's funny that people will there's never any question. People, I never have or rarely, I should say, what do I have a patient say to me, was that dream from God? They'll either say it was, or they'll say, no, this is my unconscious mind working stuff out. And both of those can be true, and they can be true at the same time. Right. That's it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not mutually exclusive. Um, so, there's another dream I recount in my book of, this was, I guess, during the 19th century in Charleston, South Carolina. There were there were a lot of shipping that was going on between Charleston and England at that time, and this is in the later 19th century. And a boat had gone out from Charleston and had been lost. It never arrived in England, and they thought that the boat had gone down, and nobody knew. But this woman kept having a dream of seeing the captain of this boat
Mm.
and some of the sailors in the water holding on to flotsam and jetsam, trying, hoping um, for rescue. So she told her husband. Her husband was an influential man, so they got out a search party, went looking for the boat, but they didn't find it. But the dream kept recurring. Okay, and the woman again prevailed on her husband, and again he had them send out boats, and again, they didn't find anything. But the third time was the charm because they kept up with the dream, and finally, um, they did find they found exactly what the woman saw. They found the captain, barely alive, but holding on to some piece of the boat, and some of the crew in the water, and they were rescued. They survived. So,
Hmm.
what was that from God? I would say it is. I'm a man of faith. Was it, you know, was it her subconscious? Did it come from her subconscious? Probably not, because she didn't know any of these people. She didn't know any of the people on the boat. She didn't know anything about that. She just had the dream. Now, was that so you say, well, maybe that's a psychic happening. Maybe it was. Psychic things do occur. I mean, that's a whole. We could spend hours talking about that. Psychic phenomena do occur, and maybe that was. But then, who's to say that God didn't cause that to happen so that these people would be rescued? So you're going to answer it based on your own frame of reference. But there's no question that this was miraculous.
Well, an empiricist might argue we should investigate to see if she put a bomb on the boat. But that would
Uh,
be I would accept the mantle of that's empiricism as faith. That's a
yeah.
big enough stretch. That's unlikely enough. If you're going to ask what is more likely,
Uh,
right? The rationalist favorite
yeah.
question, that one would be pretty unlikely.
Yeah. It's true.
But
It's true.
okay,
I
so
won't
the
go there.
what it sounds like, well, no, I'll just ask the question. I'll let you answer it.
Mhm.
Is the primary value of dreams then, in your view, psychological or spiritual?
Um, yes and yes. All right. So we know that dreaming itself it is necessary for psychological health. There have been studies done where people basically they were in a sleep lab, and every time REM started to occur, rapid eye movement started to occur, which is a sign that you're dreaming. They were woken up. Okay, so dreaming was or there are also drugs that can suppress dreaming, but when anytime dreaming is suppressed, especially over more than a day or two, a lot of psychological problems develop quickly.
Hmm.
Anxiety, depression, deep anxiety and depression, really problematical stuff acting out. So we know that dreaming is necessary. We know and from a psychological point of view, it's the mind sorting itself out, mind doing things and sorting itself out. So from a spiritual point of view, there's a reason that the Bible has so many dreams interpreted in it, and it must be important, or it wouldn't happen so often in the spiritual world. So obviously, and it's interesting, those dreams were, when they occurred, like Joseph, Jesus's dad, his earthly dad anyway. Um, he had a dream about his soon-to-be wife, Mary, that no, she was not unfaithful to him, even though she was pregnant, and he should go ahead with her and marry her. And he didn't wake from it saying, "Ah, that was just a dream. That's ridiculous." He paid attention to it, and in ancient times, and certainly, even up to the mid 20th century, um, we as doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists paid a lot more attention to dreams than we do now, and that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, is because we stopped doing that, and that's to our detriment. Because when we lose that window into the unconscious mind, we lose a lot of information, and we lose a lot of the why. Why do I behave this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do I keep doing what I don't want to do? And the answers are usually there, but if you won't look at them, you're not going to get them.
I think what's interesting about what you're doing and what I'm doing, how I look at things, is that there's a real parallel in that what I would call using reason to filter and regulate, your instinct and emotion, is really what you're doing, in that there's this unconscious activity, and you're trying to build conscious awareness of that unconscious activity, so that
Hmm.
you understand more about what's really going on with you, what's really motivating. Those are really the same
Yeah,
thing. I
yeah.
mean, there's this the faith angle, and you're coming at it from a religious perspective and from a particular religious perspective,
True.
which
Yes.
I do also, but a very very different
Okay.
religious perspective. But that essentially that mechanism is the same, which I think is. I mean, this is what I love on this
Yes.
show is when you have people
Yes.
with really, really different, some really, really different worldviews actually find, find common ground. And that
I
every
find that
self-help book, every
especially
written,
around this subject, yes, I find that often happens.
yeah.
Because
Well, I mean, listen,
you're not the first person who's interviewed me who's come from that perspective. But as you say, it makes sense. No matter what perspective you're coming from, it still makes sense because it's so very subjective.
yeah. Well, and that on the subjective side, I mean, how does one go about distinguishing between a dream that just feels really meaningful and one that is actually really telling you something true about the world or even about your own life?
Mm.
So the example of
Hmm.
the woman who dreamed of a shipwreck, she's dreaming about something that's
Yes,
really true about the world, and though that's a very like either it
right.
is or it isn't, and we can see it. But for how does this affect my life and how I'm thinking about my life and what my goals are, or what I should be doing, or what's right or what's wrong,
Hmm.
is much more subjective.
Yeah, it is subjective. But you know, uh, look, the dream I told you about with Jack Nicklaus, he didn't awaken from that dream saying, "Ah, stupid, I'm not gonna try that." No. He said,
Yeah,
"Oh, okay. This is what must be wrong." And he went out and tried it, and it worked fine, okay? So, people, for the most part, won't doubt what happens in their dreams. They won't they won't question it, um, because if the, reasoning is, "This is coming from my own mind, why would I question that? This is what I actually think." On some level. Sometimes people are surprised, but then when they think about it and they think, yeah, that surprises me, but then it really shouldn't because that really is the way I feel about this. That really is the way I feel about this person. A lot of what goes on in the therapist's office is getting people to tell the truth about how they really feel about things. Okay, to tell the truth about it, to not
right.
to take the conscious filters that say, "Oh, I don't want to say anything bad about so and so or such and such," and just putting that aside and saying, "Ah, no, here it is, in my gut, this is the way I really feel." Well, well, your dreams are your gut, okay? Yes, sometimes they're messages from God, and sometimes they're not, but they are your gut. The feelings that come out, that's your gut. That's what's really going on, and that's why they're so important. And if unfortunately, insurance companies who pay the bills for most of us who do therapy don't pay for that. So,
Mm.
so a lot of us who do the work I do don't pay attention to dreams, but I do, and my patients do.
Well, you can give them the treatment they need. You just have to use a different code when you fill out the form, right?
Exactly. There's no code for dreams, but
Yeah.
I can do other things like CB. I do other forms of therapy as well that do have codes.
I'm still back, I think, to the misinterpretation problem, and what I by that I mean
Mm,
again taking it from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind, from the instinct and
mm,
urges,
yeah.
to reason. I think it seems very clear that, and there's a lot of evidence that a lot of times what people think is just wrong. That it's just that they just got it wrong, and a lot of times what people believe is knowledge is really just a belief, and that those beliefs are often really distorted by personal interest and these instincts and emotions and tribal affiliations and social cues and all the rest of it. So I'm curious about that the problem of misinterpretation, where that
Mm.
the in the process of trying to reason out what the dream is, you end up just doing what the elephant wanted.
Oh, okay. So what I would say is this. The best interpreter of any dream is the person who dreamed it. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that a person like me, who is their therapist and maybe knows them, can't interpret a dream well either. But here's what I found. Yeah, there have been a number of cases where uh, my my patient will interpret a dream and I'll interpret a dream, okay? The same dream, but they won't be the same interpretation. That doesn't mean either one of them is wrong. They both could be right. Okay, they're real. As long as it lines up with what's going on in your life as the dreamer, and with the way you see the world and the way you experience the world, um, it's going to be. It could be right. I've had uh, uh, patients admit to me, "Well, I think my interpretation is good, but I like your interpretation too." Again, sometimes there's more than one thing that our minds are teaching us through dreams. So we can't be dogmatic about it. There's not one interpretation that is it, and there's nothing else being said, because the mind is especially the unconscious mind, is a very fluid and imaginative and creative thing, and sometimes uh, it's telling us more than one thing at a time. So it helps to have that perspective from somebody else.
Yeah, I would assume though that if you had a patient, let's say who was an alcoholic and came to you and said, "Hey, look, I had a dream last night where I drank responsibly. I just
Mhm.
had was at a party and I just had one cocktail and I didn't want any more." I think
Mm.
my personal truth is that I can actually drink in in a responsible way. Well, for most people that are alcoholics, that's a really bad conclusion,
Yes.
but a
Yeah.
predictable one. A predictable one.
Yeah. So
There's
s
as powerful urge
yes.
they have to drink.
Yeah, so that's a dream that would fall under the heading of wish fulfillment, okay? Yeah, Freud was very big on that. He said the dreams were often for wish fulfillment, the fulfillment of a wish. So the way you interpret that dream is, "This is the way I wish it could be. I wish it could be like I could just drink, have one drink, not have anything the rest of the evening, be sober enough to drive home, everything's good." That's the wish that goes on. So it's wish fulfillment, you know. Um, Now it's interesting, because I deal with alcoholics, I've dealt with many as a matter of fact. Um, they are not deluded enough to think that would be the meaning of their dream. Alcoholics and addicts of all kinds really are brutally self-honest. They really are, especially when they get into treatment or they get into AA or Narcotics Anonymous or any of those things. Um, that it comes with the territory. So what I find about them is they're brutally self-honest, and so they'll the first thing they would say to me if that was the dream is, "Yeah, that's the way I wish it could be."
Mm.
And that's exactly right, you do wish that. But that's
So it's
okay
kind of
because that tells me something, which is that's what you really want, you know?
yeah.
This is what I want. I want to be able to do this. It may not ever happen, but I want it. It's perfection. To them, it's perfection. And perfection, as I always say, is a goal that we should pursue doggedly but never expect to achieve.
Never get to, yeah. It's sort of so it's kind of a bipolar honesty, right? Because addicts are notoriously self-deceptive when they're using. Then
Yeah.
they can come up with every reason in the world why it's the
Oh, yeah.
continue to use the best thing. So they
Well,
flip, and that
yeah,
makes
they'll do
sense
that.
once they're in therapy.
You're right. Yeah. They'll do that, but even while they're doing it, they know that it's ridiculous. They know that what they're saying is ridiculous. I've talked to enough addicts to know this. But what addicts are really good at is lying to other people and convincing them that it's okay. Addicts get
Yeah.
very, very good at that. And the old joke in my profession is, well, how do you know when an addict is lying? And the answer is his lips are moving. Okay. So
Yeah. Addicts and politicians. The
yeah,
so
indeed.
if two
Indeed.
if two people have dreams that, let's say, point in completely different directions, how do you evaluate it? How do you what's the process of going through? Do you just leave it as like it's each of their personal truths, an expression I really hate, but and
Me
leave
too.
it at that, or is there some way to actually try to figure out who's got it right, who is God talking to, and who is just popping
So,
something out of their
what
mind?
kind of dream are we talking? Are we talking about a precognitive dream here, or a prophetic dream? What kind of dream are you talking about? Because
Oh,
every dream is personal to the dreamer. So, yeah, two
well,
people could
maybe you had
see
a
things
married couple.
differently.
You have a married couple
Mhm.
where, and one of them has a dream that says that, that we have to stay together. This is that's the right path. And the other one has a dream that says that no, we have to be apart.
Yeah. So both of those, taking those at face value, both of them are the wishes of the dreamers.
Mm.
Okay, but yeah, I do a lot of marriage counseling, and I've seen a lot of couples where that's exactly what's going on. One partner really wants to try and rebuild this, and the other one is done. They're through, and they're just doing this to say that they did it. Okay, so it's not. Again, there's nothing authoritative. It's like not like we can say one is right and the other is wrong. It's the way they as people feel. And now, is that it's not their truth. It's what they believe. It's what they think. It's what they're thinking at the time. There's only one truth. It's the one we're living in right now. Um, but yes, absolutely, that can happen. Things like that can happen. But usually, you know, any dream we have, we're not trying to apply it to others unless it obviously applies to others. And the symbols in dreams, as I mentioned, don't always mean what I think they mean, even as a therapist. As Freud once remarked, to Freud, everything in dreams represented some form of sexuality. Okay. Uh, but even he remarked that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Yes,
Okay.
famously. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
George
And that's
Carlin
what he
had a
was
great
getting at.
retort to that, which I won't repeat, but
Okay. Please don't.
um, yeah. So I think we're aligned in the broadly in the this relationship between the conscious and unconscious mind, and that dreams are
Mm,
a part of the unconscious mind. I guess I'm more cautious
mm,
about thinking of them as these messages from an external source. So
mm,
and you told the story of the woman who dreamed of the shipwreck, but how else might you try to
right.
convince of someone like me that there's an external source, and how the one goes about parsing between those, whether it's wish fulfillment or something that just emerges from the mind versus something that's coming from an external source that presumably
Mm.
really should be paid attention to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't try to convince you that it was from an external source. If you're not telling me it's from an external source, from God or whatever you view as God, um, then okay, I'm taking that at face value because that's your world. That's your milieu of thinking. So I'm not trying to convince you that it is. So I would never do that. Um, I don't think I've ever told a patient that his or her dream was from God. They tell me that it's from God,
I see.
and they tell me because they know. And it's one of those things that you just know. And yeah,
Mhm.
I wish there were a more scientific explanation for that, but but experience has shown me that the people who tell me this is from God, um, it's what sometimes what people say to is, well, how do you know? How do you know it's from God? Okay, and one of the things I say is, well, is what's going on in the dream, or is that consistent with God's character? Is that consistent with God's character as you know it? Is that something God would tell you to do, or want you to do, or that would glorify Him? So if there's any doubt, that's the way you test it. Um, but as I said, in 99% of cases, if somebody tells me something's from God, they don't doubt it. They believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That I wanted to ask when you were talking about hypnosis and the state that people are in,
Mhm.
and how that allows you to communicate directly with the unconscious. I'm curious,
Yes.
and have people done? Have there been like MRIs when people are under hypnosis, and have we observed that the say the prefrontal cortex goes bye bye, and you're able to communicate with other parts of the? Is there neurological evidence of that, or?
Yeah, there was a great, I should really keep it handy to send out to people, but there was a great article in Scientific American about this, that basically said, yes, hypnosis is a real thing. It's a real state of mind because that was the debate. People were saying, this is not a real state of mind. It's not something really different. But no, their beta and theta waves are much different under
Uh-huh.
hypnosis than they are in the waking state. So yes, there's evidence that this is a completely different state of mind. Now, um, does the frontal cortex step out of it? No, because frontal cortex, while it's not the source of dreaming, is necessary to dreaming because it's
Mm.
the It's the logical part of us that's, you can have a dream, and even in a dream say, "This is ridiculous. This couldn't really happen." Okay, but
Yeah.
yeah, there are dreams when you're dreaming. So the prefrontal
Mm.
cortex is still operant. So I don't think there's any brain scans that are showing that. But again, the in terms of the waves and in terms of is this a different state of consciousness? Yes, it does.
So you gave the example too of the humorous example of the lady who came to get hypnotized to quit smoking just to prove to her husband that it wouldn't work because she just wanted to keep
Yeah.
smoking.
Yes.
But there is a spectrum of kind of susceptibility or at least openness to being hypnotized that has an impact on how much effort you have to make it work or if it'll work at all. Is that true?
Um, yes and no. So that's really the wrong way to think about it. So there's not a spectrum of susceptibility. There is a spectrum of willingness to allow it to work. Okay, and that's
Okay.
what you saw with that lady. Okay,
Yeah.
um, so that's where there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum. There are some people who are totally, totally in with it, totally sold out, and totally believe it will work. And in my experience, hypnosis is always effective for them, always. Okay. But there are other people who are like, I don't know, maybe this isn't really good. And, is this something that my religion would frown on, or was something that my doctor wouldn't like, or, they have these doubts. And so they're kind of, I don't know how willing I am to accept this. And the less willingness there is, and thus maybe they would not trust me as much, and that's important. It's important to the person who's doing the hypnosis with you. It's important that you trust them. Uh, so that's where the spectrum is, and that's a great determinant of how well it will work.
Okay, and so but the more resistor types you have, I'm presuming there's some things you go through to try to break that down,
Hmm.
but that and it sounds like you're saying that that's independent from how well it would work if they were just simply open to it.
Exactly, exactly right.
Okay,
The
yeah,
the openness and what the openness and willingness for it to work is really the essential ingredient in whether or not it works.
yeah, okay. I guess the the place where I still remain a little skeptical is, and it really has to do. You may just have a higher opinion of people than I do. I'm ashamed to say, but the in my world, there's this concept we have called the rationalist delusion. So the idea that if you were to try to set up a society where everyone was just Immanuel Kant and they would just were this incredible rational beings and you could always count on them to do the right thing, it would
Hmm.
be a disaster. And I would probably
Right.
agree on that. And I
Yes.
think I think that stuff is pretty deeply rooted, and I think that
Hmm.
my feeling is that humans just left to their own devices get it wrong a lot. What's great about what you're doing is that you are getting a little outside of just somebody trying to reason things out or figure things out in their own inside the walls of their own mind, where they're going to um, uh, more use that rationalization much more often. You're actually no, let's test these ideas. Let's talk about this, which
Yeah.
is what the process of reason is. But I
Yes.
think
Yes.
there's this the acceptance of that what somebody believes. I know this to be true because I dreamed this. I'm skeptical of that because I think that people are just driven so much by these instincts and emotions that they will convince themselves of lots of
Hmm.
things that are just not the case.
Yeah. And does that happen sometimes? Sure, it does. Of course, it does. But for the most part, I've got 20 years of experience with this now. For the most part, it doesn't. For the most part, it doesn't happen. But when it does, that just if it happens to me in a therapy office, it just means I need to take the therapy in a different direction. Okay,
Hmm.
that's all it means. Uh, so I don't confront that. I don't. If somebody tells me they had a vision about something, I don't tell 'em, "Oh, that's crazy. You couldn't have had that. I think I have to list you as a paranoid schizophrenic." No, I don't do that. Okay? If they're a paranoid schizophrenic, I'm gonna know it. If, on the other hand, they're just somebody who had a dream or had a vision, a daydream, let's say, um, okay, let's work with that because my assumption is, all right, this is your mind working. This is your mind telling you a story, and there must be a reason. So what is it? So that's what we work with. So we don't go like on the. I don't make any comments on the veracity or possibility of what you dreamed or what you experienced. I just say, all right, let's work with that because that's telling us something about what's going on in your mind.
So I want to ask you a question just about me, and hopefully this won't result in me getting a bill for you for an hour of your time as a therapist.
So it's only $200 an hour. Come on,
No,
you can afford
no
it. No, I'm just
promises.
kidding.
No promises. One of the I think resistances that I have to remembering dreams is that to
Mm,
me the bits and pieces that I'll remember and things that I'll see are so fantastical and so crazy and so divorced from what I experience as reality that I feel like it's a little bit of a window into insanity. What it would
mm,
be like to lose the thread, to not be able to differentiate between what's real and what's not is kind of what the dream
mhm.
world is like. And so there's a part of that part of my resistance I think is rooted in that fear, for want of a better word, that's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is what it would be like to be nuts, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I can understand that. I can understand that fear. Um, but, but here's the thing. Most people, when they dream, the reaction to the dream is, "It was just a dream." Okay? That they're not going there. They're not
Yeah.
saying, "Oh my gosh, is this me tipping into psychopathy? Is this me, is this me becoming just hopelessly lost?" They're really not going there. Uh, and you don't really have to worry about that because that's the reason you have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, because your conscious mind the conscious mind is still in charge, even though the subconscious mind will push at us and do things and sometimes make us say things or do things that we wouldn't do that we if we thought about them, we thought, well, why did he do that? Sometimes we'll say that. Why did I behave that way? Um, so yeah, that's going to happen, sure. But the mind is very much protective of itself, and and actually your unconscious mind, I should say, not subconscious, your unconscious mind, um, it's one of its jobs is to protect you psychologically. And that's why it'll try and work things out. That's why it'll try and work problems out, and probably it will show you alternate endings or alternate
Mm.
ideas, or you know, it's trying to protect you. And yeah, sometimes it will swat a fly with a sledgehammer. Okay, so another example I give in my book is somebody who as a child, went to the circus with his uncle, who was an alcoholic and a drunk, and the uncle got drunk and beat him up, but he loved the circus, but then the uncle beat him up.
Mm.
So and he remembered the smell of alcohol from the uncle's breath. So after that, he couldn't stand being around alcohol. He just
Oh.
couldn't. And or around, so if somebody, his Aunt Martha was having a glass of wine with her dinner, he'd freak out. He just couldn't handle that.
Mm.
Um, so that's the unconscious mind saying, "Hey, when that alcohol smells around, bad things happen. So anytime that happens, I'm going to get you away from that." And that's sometimes what your unconscious mind will do. And that's the time when we need to get with somebody like me and say, "All right, let's work this out. Let's do a little reality testing here, and let's see, is this really so bad? And where did it come from?" Again, the why. You know, most even somebody like that, as soon as they know why, they're ready to reason it out and get moving and move on and recover.
Um, so for me, this conversation, I think something that you've kind of turned my head a little bit and opened my mind up a little bit is that so I am very much a practitioner of trying to understand how my mind works. And for I've been
Mm,
a regular meditator for 13 years,
wonderful.
and have noticed some real changes in how I understand how my mind works. But I realize that
Mm,
this is another avenue, right? The idea, if I could understand, because what is it, 80% of what our brain does is things that aren't part of our consciousness
mm,
experience, but
right.
we have the
It would
ability to
overwhelm us.
pull.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the ability, and we all have that happen, right? We all
Yes.
have the experience of our reason and rationality being completely overwhelmed by emotion that just seems to pop up from
Hmm.
nowhere. So we kind of
Yes.
understand that, and
Hmm.
that, for me, that's the biggest single thing that I've gotten out of meditating for 13 years. Is I definitely have anger issues, which I come by honestly from my paternal genetics,
Oh.
and the to understand, I don't, I perhaps have those feelings that pop up, maybe less often, but that's not really the difference. The difference is the ability to identify them and
Hmm.
understand them, and
Hmm.
kind of to take
Yeah.
that breath. But
Yes.
what's interesting about this conversation that I'm realizing, it's like, well, wait a minute, there's a whole nother avenue here, a whole nother layer of what my
Yes.
mind is doing that I could perhaps understand. So
Hmm.
I will definitely do that. I will definitely uh, tell myself before I'm going to bed that I'm going to try to remember the dreams, and I will let you know if I if I get
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Just tell yourself that you will remember them. That's right. Don't even say try. As who is that Star Wars character that said no do no try do anyway. Uh,
oh, Yoda,
Yoda. Yeah.
there
No
is no
try do. Yeah.
try. There's only do or do not.
Yeah,
If I think that's it.
just tell yourself that you will remember your dreams. That's all. I will remember them, or be determined to remember. I'm going to remember them. You'll remember something. Most likely, you'll remember the dream that you have right before you wake up, because that's what most of us remember.
Yeah.
Um, and we almost all have dreams right before we wake up. Just the way the sleep cycle works. So yeah, that'll be interesting. And then when that happens, either write it down or speak the dream into your phone and record it, and then you can go back to it later. Um, it's quite a fascinating experience.
I have a sort of an odd pop culture question. I personally feel like dreams are a lazy and overused device in, like, film and television, and even even
Ah,
in novels. And I'm
yes.
I'm curious how, if you have some feelings about how dreams are. How do you observe dreams as they're used in that kind of in media?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you that they are. I mean, the ultimate example of that was, I don't know if you remember the television show Dallas,
Oh
where
yes, the whole season. Yes.
one of the main characters got killed off, and then at the beginning of the next season, uh, suddenly the wife gets up one day, she walks into the bathroom, and there's the guy who got killed off in the shower, and saying, "Hey, honey, how's it going?" Like, "Oh, it never happened. You mean this was all a dream?" Yeah,
That was a
I'm
whole
like,
season, right?
"No,
Didn't they just decide
no,
the whole thing?
come on." Yeah,
Yeah,
they
that
have a
was.
whole season without him,
Yeah,
without
I
him.
think they painted
Yes.
themselves into a corner and said, what can
Oh,
we do? I
that was
know.
just hilarious. That was just
Yeah,
hilarious. It's one of
that
those,
is. You're right. That's the ultimate
it's a
example.
poetic license, gone a little too far. So yeah, it's like, I guess what I would say, it's because to what I do is I don't take those things too seriously. I'm like you. I'm like, "Eh, come on, as a psychologist, I see things all the time that, I see things like amnesia, and I go, nah, that's not the way amnesia behaves. No, this is not right. Somebody go do some research, really, before you put this in you, you know. But then, as a person who writes books, it makes me really vigilant about doing research about these things so that I get them right. So that
Yeah,
I'm not just pulling it out of my head, and saying, okay, here it is. It was just a dream. No, no, not the way
yeah.
things happen.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'd say, kind of in sum, that we both see dreams as meaningful experiences, and this connection to
Yes.
the between the conscious and the subconscious, and maybe where we're not on the same page is this the idea of an external communication, and even that,
Hmm.
I could imagine a lengthy conversation that you and I would have about external
Hmm.
conversation, and what does one mean when one says God. with
Yes.
the principal difference probably being the active agent part of it. But that's really this is really a great conversation. But before I let you go,
Mm,
I tell us a
yes.
little bit about where people can find out more about what you do and about the where they can get the book and all that. I'll put some things in the
Okay.
comments, but give us an
Terrific.
upshot.
Sure, sure. So the book is called Dreaming God's Way, and it's it offers you a number of things. It talks about a lot of different kinds of dreams, including precognitive dreams, dreams that foretell something that happens in the future. For example, Abraham Lincoln dreamed of his own assassination before it happened, um, and there are many other examples in there. So it tells you a lot about different kinds of dreams, but it also tells you about why dreams are so important in our life, in our psychological life, and why they're so essential. And then it gives you I give a step-by-step process um, for remembering at the beginning of which I gave you, and writing down your dreams and then making sense of them. And really what it boils down to is this story that's being told in the dream. How does that relate to my life? Is what's going on in my life right now? And almost always it will relate to something significant that's going on in your life. And if you think of it that way, then you'll be able to plumb what's there. But anyway, the book will offer you all of that. It's not a long book, but it has a lot of valuable information. So it's Streaming God's Way. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, iTunes, all over the place. Just go on and search for Dreaming God's Way, and you will find it, and hopefully enjoy it, and hopefully get something out of it, and open the door to the world of your own dreams, which is really what I'm after. Really, why I wrote this book, because that's what I want people to do.
Yeah, great, great. Era, thanks so much. This was a great conversation and exactly what
Yes.
the kind of thing I like to do, where I could to take somebody from not only a different discipline, but with some different worldviews and be able to have
hmm
a nice, respectful conversation. I really appreciate your time and your rationality.
Thank you. It was good to talk to you, and I have no problem talking. You're not the first person I've talked to who's come from a different religious point of view, or even different philosophical point of view. But the interesting thing is dreams kind are so universal in that we all do it. Uh, it brings us together in a way that is sometimes
feast of
unexpected.
reason and the flow of soul.